Our next presenter is Titi Taiwo. She also has a passion for working with patients living with chronic heart failure. However, the patients that she works with currently as a registered nurse are learning how to live life with a ventricular assist device. This is basically a piece of metal that takes over the work of the heart. It's an implantable device that pumps the blood throughout the body simply because the heart cannot function. So these patients would either die, which is sometimes a really good option, or they would be on a heart transplant list. But as a nurse practitioner student, she was very eager to learn how a primary care system and how a primary care nurse practitioner would support this patient in an outpatient setting. She has dedicated her scholarly work to the project entitled Early Palliative Care in Left Ventricular Assist Device Patients with Destination Therapy. Please help me welcome Titi.
Thank you, Lisa, for the introduction. The objectives of our presentation today is I'm going to describe the purpose of my project, the different types of LVAD therapies, the literature reviews, the findings, and then describe the method, implementation, and then discuss the integration of the DNP project. So, my passion for this LVAD patients began about maybe 15 years ago when I first became a nurse, maybe 2 years after. My first contact with LVAD patients, I was shocked. And I wonder how this person is going to survive outside the hospital environment. I wonder about the quality of life because this person has to depend on the device. So years down the road, I went back to school for my master's program, and I decided to do a project, my plan B, on quality of life for LVAD patients. And then when I came into the DNP program, I thought, you know what, the quality of life was after the implantation. What can I do before implantation? So that's why I decided to do a project on early palliative care for LVAD patients, especially those with destination therapy. So the purpose of this project is to explore if early integration of palliative care for LVAD patients will improve quality of life and then control their symptoms. Also to coordinate palliative care in the community to promote physical and well-being of those patients. Also to involve the practitioners, the nurse practitioners in the community, to be the ones that will start this conversation when they're in the community, way before they became really ill, to, in fact, before even thinking of getting these LVADs. So background, this is what it looks like when someone has an LVAD. You have the pump. It's gotten smaller over the years. It used to be very big and very uncomfortable, but now it's gotten a little smaller. But the basic thing is they have the device. It has a cannula that's connected to the aorta, and then it also has a cannula that's connected to the ventricle. So when the blood goes into the ventricle, because that's where the problem is, they have issues having the blood flow into the aorta, the oxygenated blood, so that it can go all over the body so they can function. So that's where the problem is. So that's why they put this device. You do have some people that have the right ventricular device as well, but the left is more common than the right. And some people have both. So the device in the middle, that round device in the middle, is where the pump is, and then it pushes the blood through the cannula and then goes into the aorta, and then it goes to the rest of the body. And that's how the LVAD works. That's how it works, which I just described now. So heart failure in the United States, 5.8 million. This was from 2014. That was when I began the project. So, but currently there is no cure for heart failure still. And then the LVAD came about maybe years ago, early 1990s or late 80s, when they started the LVAD pump. And then they started with people there because there was a shortage of heart. There is such shortage of donors. So they started with just a plain LVAD so that people can use it, bridge to transplant. So, and then you have that until you can get a heart transplant. And then later it became, they have another one that they could do as a bridge to recovery. So like people that have surgery or they have injury to the heart, those people could have the ones that are bridge to recovery. And then until the heart heals, and then they can take that out. And then the last one, which I am particularly involved in, is the destination therapy. That means you have the device, you can't take them out, either because of age, because I think the age limit is, 70 or so. So if you have a device after that, it's going to be a destination therapy. Or you are not a candidate for either recovery or the transplant. So like I said, I've been interested in this. I did projects on quality of care. And I realized that even with going to doing research, I was not able to find a lot of research on early palliative care. There were tons of research on quality of life. But like I said, those were post-implantation, looking for something to do before the implantation to make this process a lot smoother for those patients. So there was one that was particularly interesting. It was a retrospective study on the advantages of proactive palliative care medicine for about 19 patients out of 13 LVAD DT patients with 1 day. What happened is, at the end of the study, they only had about 1 to 5 days before implantation. There was no early palliative care before then. It was between day 1 to 5 days before implantation that they thought about palliative care. And what happens with these patients after the implantation, a lot of them said that they could not even remember that that palliative was discussed. Because, during that time, it's very difficult. You have a lot of specialists coming to tell them about what's going to happen in the next 2 days or 3 days. So some of them said they couldn't remember. Some of them said it was overwhelming for them. So this is one of the reasons why this process should start before they end up needing this implant. So that was the gap. Even though they did say that it was still helpful, but they would have wanted it done sooner than that time. So that was the gap in the research. But it was still helpful, but they would have wanted it sooner so they can plan ahead. The conceptual framework for this project is by Jean Watson. Jean Watson is an internationally known nurse. She came about this human caring science in 1979, and then she's modified it since then. There are about 3 major concepts which she talked about, and I thought that was very, very true to people that have disease, even people that don't have disease, you want to be treated like a person. You don't want to be treated as if you just have a disease. And that's all what she talks about. It's about the whole person, the body, the mind, and the spirit. So I thought that's the best concept that goes along with this project. And she talks about actions, honoring and caring, affection for our patients, listening to our patients, education, being there for the patients and listening to their concerns, providing therapeutic environment for patients, and support of the mind, body, and spirit. Supports their concerns, supports their spiritual requests, and supports their verbalizations of negative thoughts, of positive thoughts, because that's therapeutic for them. And so then the transpersonal relationship is when she thought about, when you're strengthening those patients, you're also strengthening yourself because you're learning as well. You're teaching the patients things to do, how to go about with their lives, and then you are also growing with the patients. You know when something's wrong. You know where you began and when to make changes. That's because you've developed that relationship with the patient and the trusting that you've developed over time. So that part of it would, in a case where you have to make a decision or make a change in the care plan, the patient's probably willing to go along with you because they know that you have their best interest at heart and not just telling them to do things just because you want to just go on to another patient, right? So I thought with the LVADs people that have this destination therapy, they need someone to be there with them. They know they're going to die eventually. However, the little time that they have, they want someone that's passionate and there for them every time. And then the caring moment. The caring moment, it's like when you build on each other's perception. It results in a new way of knowing, new ways of growing. You use your métiers, you know something. You're a healer, as we learn. We're all healers, and we are present. We do things that make these patients want us to come back. And so in addition to the nurse, in addition to the compassion, you demonstrate positive and therapeutic and integrative modalities for these patients so that they don't have to be thinking of this device all the time. Because some of the issues with the device is it affects their daily routine. They can't shower. They can't just get on the plane. They can't just get into any game. They have to be conscious of, I have to take my battery with me. I have to go somewhere where I know there will be light, that in case my battery runs out, I need to plug it in. So they deal with financial issues. They deal with emotional issues. And also, they deal with support issues, the caregiver burden. A lot of those patients some of them can't take care of themselves. They have maybe family members doing it, taking care of them, and so they get burned too. So sometimes we are the people that they come to. We have to find them that support. Family, okay. So as a family nurse practitioner, we have to practice this human caring theory because it is useful. It provides actions that enhance and preserve the patient's dignity. As a family, as FNP, it creates room for a patient-centered care, collaboration and planning of care across the continuum. Develops a trusting and non-judgmental relationship with the patient and other relevant providers. Consequently, begins a conversation leading to the policy and system change, resulting in the early integration of palliative care for LVAD DT patients. So my subjects are providers. because if we don't order these consults, it's not going to be done. And I find out that a lot of times, I'm not sure if, depending on where you work, there's some people have it that they just order it for a lot of people. In some places, they don't. So, and especially for this LVAD patients, I thought they need to have these early consults, especially beginning from the community. But sometimes orders have to go from the hospital with them to the community before this triggers palliative care consults. So I had some providers participated at my work, and so did presentation to them and talk about what my research says and some of the patients that we've had that we thought would have benefited from early palliative care. So I had to do them like several times because where I work, they don't stay in one place. They go around, like maybe 3 weeks here, 2 weeks there, and so, but it was okay doing that as long as I'm able to get the people I want to present to. I presented to mostly nurse practitioners. And then, so from the survey, from the pre-survey, it seems like some of them were not even thinking of early palliative care until down the road. So there were about 5 questions about what do you think of palliative care? What do you think of early palliative care for LVAD patients? Questions sort of like, do you normally order early palliative care for LVAD DT patients? And and I did a 10 minutes presentation each time and answer questions. And then they did a post survey. These were all anonymous. They did a post survey, and about 70% of providers that I presented to said they would like to be able to order early palliative care sooner than they normally do now. However, about 30% says that because of the either barriers or policy, they cannot do that. And when they talk about barriers, they talk about the patient's perception, how the patient will feel if you begin a conversation about palliative care. And like some people think if you say palliative, you mean you're going to die. Some people confuse palliative with hospice. So it depends on how you approach the patient and talk to them about this issue. And so, the goal of implementing this early palliative care is, like we said, to promote emotional well-being, for patients to feel that they're somebody. They're not just depending on this device, because it is hard for them. And they frequently go back to the hospital for one reason or the other. So also working within the organization to see how we can change this. And the providers that I presented to were very willing. They were willing to see what we can do to make sure that this policy that we have, or that they can order early palliative sooner, and so that in the community we can start talking to them about this. It doesn't mean, because sometimes in the community we're able to know that this patient has heart failure, and down the road they might probably die soon if nothing's done because medication isn't working anymore. So the implications for practice is that the finding of this project suggested that providers that were participants in my project are open to early integration of palliative care, and for its patient-centered educational resource addressing the importance of early palliative care and its effects on quality of life for these patients. We, as advanced practitioners, we need to we were taught about anticipatory guidance. We need to follow up with that and do that with all of our patients, not just people that we think are well, okay, this is what's gonna, no, even if they're sick, even if we need to do that a lot more. And early collaboration. Early collaboration within the community to give them the support that they need. If they're having financial needs, what can we do for them to make this process easier for them? Support issues, what can we do for them? Do we need to have them go somewhere where they have activities, daycare, or is there some volunteers that we know within the society, the environment that can go in and visit and then or help out with a caregiver? I know there's a caregiver support group, but sometimes they can't get to it, so all those things we need to. This is part of anticipatory guidance and collaboration that we need to do. And then for just like every other disease, there is a trajectory for LVAD patients. So there are about, I think, 4 different trajectories. So early trajectory are people that have this LVAD implanted and then they die within 90 days. So you could see how relevant this early palliative care is. Maybe they would decide not to even do it. Maybe they will. However, they have the information and then they have the tools to help them throughout this process way longer before they get the strand, they have the implant. And then persistent, they are the group that they would tolerate the LVAD for a while, but then they later decline due to complications or organ failure. And then terminal, they benefited from the transplant a lot longer. However, the quality of life begins to decline. So, and then they begin to have infections, comorbidities, heart failure, or other incurables such as cancer. A lot of them do come back to the hospital because of infection, blood clots, bleeding, so. And then acute, that's all of a sudden they have maybe hemorrhage, so then that's it, and then they die. For the 8 essentials of the doctoral education, the 2 that I thought were particularly fits my projects are essential 2 and 7. 2, which it's about organizational and systems leadership for quality improvement and system and thinking. So, which means we have to navigate the system to make sure that we find a way to see it might be through policy change, working within our organization and see if we have any group that's working with legislatures on what we can do. Because people with, everybody comes into the hospital. When you get to a certain point, they ask you, DNR, DNI, they ask you about your code status. I don't see why we can't be talking about palliative care, just like a routine conversation like we do for DNR or DNI or code status or so. And then clinical prevention, that's essential 7, and population health for improving the nation's health. So that's education. As I talk about palliative care with people, we still have to do that education because they have palliative care doesn't mean that they can improve or we can manage their disease. So still talk to them about those issues. Then barrier as to why they don't want to have this palliative care. They might have a very cogent reason. Maybe they want to see their grandkids in 4 years, or they just don't feel the way you do. They might feel their quality of life is perfect the way it is. So, however, we still have to, as part of the healthcare providers that deals with education, we still have to do that all the time. Inform the patient about options. This is all about options that they have. In future, still want to continue to address patients' perceived barriers. Barriers are about early palliative care. And then update the clinic policy or health policy, either in the community or in the hospital. Continue to talk about these patients. I'm so passionate about them, and I would never stop. I just will continue. If there's any other way I could, work with anybody on this, I would do. I'll take it. And then so continue to coordinate and collaborate with interprofessional agencies, the patient and the family for optional patient-centered care. triggers for completion. I would like to see, it's a recommendation to see triggers in the EMR, to say, just like we have triggers for other things, like, have you done this? So you're supposed to discuss this with the patient. And then palliative information written in several languages so that people understand. We have people that don't speak English, don't speak Spanish, don't speak Somali, don't speak French, don't speak Russia. We have some of those, we have them. But we still should make an attempt to have them in different languages. So that we don't miss out on people that don't mind this kind of things. So we don't assume, we're not judgmental, we're just trying to give out the information to people and let them make the decision as to what they want. Expansion. Standardized palliative care consults for LVAD, DT patients throughout the system. Routine information, like we just discussed, for early palliative care beginning outpatient. All of this has to begin outpatients because they see us more than they come to the hospital. So, and we know them longer. We know them longer than in the hospital. They come 2 days. Most providers don't know them. They treat them, they go, and they come. But in the community, they come to us. You might have them or a whole family for years. So you kind of see when they're going down, and that's why we're in the best position to talk about this, because we can tell from knowing them all this time, we've been taking care of them, that this might be something to discuss with. And like I said, once they know you, they trust you, they might be willing to hear, even just to listen. That's a progress. So again, working within the organization and systems in implementing a policy that supports integrating early palliative care consults, health policy change, and then the research I would like to see further is palliative care consults prior to LVAD, because at this time I didn't get to actually go ahead, which I would have loved to do, and talk to patients and have them, because most of these were through my métiers, having worked with these patients for years and knowing that, talking to them just as a nurse, knowing that some of the things they will have, some of them bear out in research and some of them don't. So involving patients in this and providers, and having more providers get involved, more diverse, more patients get involved in this. That's one of the things. And then see if that actually improves quality of life, maybe is even better than what it is, what they have now, what it is now. So that's my future plan, if I'm able to do it. And then, so like we said, I use Jean Watson because she's all about the mind, body, and spirit. So, and this is how I see patients, because I want to be treated the way I will be treated. I want to treat patients the way I will be treated, how I would treat my husband, my family, my friends, my parents. And so I would not want anybody to define me by the device that I have. I want them to define me by me as a whole person. So that I have a lot of things. I have stories, I have journeys that I've been through. So, and we all know that from a narrative story class that, when you talk to patients, you have sometimes you have a different concept about them. You look at them and go, oh my gosh, this person's, have a little more to them than just being here. And that's usually very helpful when you do your care plan, when you make decisions. So this was the beginning of my journey into the DNP program. That was the Black Elk Peak in South Dakota when we had the orientation, the top picture. And I thought I would not make it to the peak. I remember, I was tired. My legs were tired, but my heart was there. I'm like, I am going to go. I've climbed before, but not that high. But my heart, after 3 hours of walk, I could walk all day, but then when we got to the point of climbing, I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna make it? But we had, just like we support each other now and everywhere, the people that I was with, we were cheering each other. We got tired, we sat down, we got up, and we went back up. So it was nice. I made it there, and I sat there up there. I'm like, yeah, if I make it up here, I will definitely make it through the DNP program. So, I was so for about a week or so, but I'm like, I'm gonna keep going. So I'm happy to be in this program. We've had, up and downs, but for the most part, we are I am happy that I went through this. And then being able to do this, that is a big thing. So I want to thank the professors, the faculty members. I saw Catherine up there. She was she was my first instructor when I got here. So, and I remember the head tie I did to her hair. Picture. I should have brought it. Yeah. So, and I want Dr. Laura Wentworth, thank you for your constructive critique and your advice. And every other faculty members there, thank you. Thank my classmates. I didn't have to join you guys, but you were very, you took me in, I should just say that. And it's been nice. So thank also the people that I work with. I thought one of them would be here today, not here. They've been very helpful in switching shifts with us. I work with Bettina, and they're the best people to work with. You call them last minute and say, please, I had to be here, be at school, and then they go, okay, whatever you want, and they do it. That's nurses. We always want to support each other, regardless. And then, lastly, I want to thank my hubby back there. See, he's my rock. He's been there all the time. I tell him, I said, it seems like we both go to the school because he's always up with me, like doing assignments and go, are you not ready to go to bed? I'm like, no, I'm not done. Okay. And then he'll stay there with me, pick me up at times when I can't drive back home from work. So I will drop you, don't worry, because you had to leave early to school. So thank you, honey. I love you. And then I owe you a trip to Venice. So thank you for listening to my presentation.
I have one question. Titi, what a fabulous project, so important. Of the, I think there was 5 nurse practitioners that you interviewed.
6.
And at one point there was only like 70% of them said that they would have thought about palliative. Do you think you shifted their thinking after working with them?
I think so, because I would think so, because they did a survey that I had the questions about their beliefs about early palliative care, what it means to them, how about LVAD patients, and because I think it seems like they feel that palliative care is for destination therapy patients, they don't really need it because they're probably gonna, pass them. So some of the research did shift their, when we talk about it, their thinking about early palliative care, not just doing palliative, but sooner than what we do now.
Good. Thank you.
Tammy, thank you for your presentation. Having worked with this patient population myself, I know the unique complexities that there are, and I'm just wondering, did you have any aha moments with patients as well, based on your MATIS? What was their MATIS telling you with palliative care, and maybe how they would see it unfolding, what they thought?
As I said, that from my MATIS talking to these patients, I know that some of them will probably maybe not want the LVAD. Especially those with destination therapy we're talking about now. Not those that need transplant, not those that just have reached the therapy. It's, they're like, why would I want to have this? And then something happens, they keep going back because they're already like deconditioned already. So they're not a candidate for anything. So, and then the burden that comes with it, frequent hospitalizations, infection. We had one that's like been there for, changed the LVAD like 3, 4, 5 times. And how could you live that way? And then the constant fear that something is wrong with the monitor. You know how many times we have to go in there afraid and scared, something's gonna happen. And that's when they're in the hospital. How about if they're home? So, and some of them have some cognitive issues that they don't even know what it is, except for the family taking care of them. What if something happened to that family? So then what's next? So that's why I thought, having this early palliative care sooner, they might have more time to talk about it, to decide if this is something I want also. And if they do, well, they've had more information than like a few days before the transplant. Yeah.
So as a primary care provider taking care of heart failure patients before they would have it implanted, how would you advise us to approach the conversation with them? At what time in their management? Obviously, this population will be seeing cardiology as well, but as a primary care provider, how can we facilitate that conversation?
Yeah, so what I would do is to build that trust first, so that they can believe you. They know you're not just saying it just to get rid of them. So I will begin the conversation first about with the way your situation is now. I've known you. I've been your provider for so period of time. And then you explain, the trajectory of heart failure and the stage they're in now, and then you tell them the options. You're not just going to tell them about palliative care. You give them other options. Either we do something or we don't, but we have options for palliative care. Because right now, medication isn't working, isn't doing it. We're not managing your disease well like we should. And so you talk to them about that. I'm sure if they have some issues, and that's like breaking the silence. So when you talk about the barriers, they might be able to talk to you. Might be someone, then that's when your health coaching skills comes in. Like, what are your barriers? What can we do? What do you think you can do too? Yeah, so, and if there's other family members, sometimes it's helpful if they come with a family member, especially maybe the spouse, because they're probably gonna be both doing it. And then so talk to them about it, and if they want to talk more, you always say, I'm here. Call me anytime, I'm here. Because that's what we're here for. So education that you believe in, and believe what you say. And listen to them. Listen to those, be mindful of those silent actions that, just don't talk too much. Know when to go.
Just a comment. So this is very important. Heart failure is in our daily lives each and every day. Of course, me and you live and breathe it. Is there any way, because I know a bridge off of my project is to bring a specialized palliative care nurse, that's a nurse practitioner, into an outpatient clinic. So that's kind of a trajectory off of my project where there's a specialized nurse practitioner that is a palliative care nurse that goes out to the clinic and meets these patients. Is that an option for your project?
I think now we do have a very good palliative care team where I work now, and but I'm not sure they go out to the community. Maybe they have some, so that's something that I will be interested in, to see how they can branch into that, and so work with, because I know I did talk to a cardiologist, one of the a group that works with us that goes back to the community and then come back to work again in the hospital. I did ask her one time and said, do you ever talk about it? She said, I've never heard the person that I work with, she is a PA, but she works with a cardiologist. She said, I've never heard that conversation with patients when we're, and she comes to see some of the elder patients, so she sees them outpatients too. She said, no. So I'm not sure if that's the system or the organization, so I can't say that for all of them. But it's something that I will be interested in, because it does kind of go back there. It will be nice.
Just a comment. I just want to thank you for the presentation. I was really moved, and I've had some of these patients, especially when you have respiratory failure with all of this. Maybe sometimes they are trained, they are on bends, and they are also on the, the cardiac device. one of my patients that was on this device kind of really felt like, I want to be with this, but that aspect of having a chaplain in moved the patient. We had a patient that had not seen a chaplain, and one of the greatest things that Mayo really does is letting a chaplain visit. This patient came from an outside hospital because they already had complications. They were almost not wanting to panic and ended up in Mayo. But that aspect of the body, mind, and spirit, I think in this our program, these are, and I think I've talked about, this transcultural, and including that spiritual aspect of it really is awesome. So including that in your project, I just love it. And from my experience, I could see how it makes a big difference where the patient is not being seen as somebody that is moved by machines, but that body and that journey of being a person is still within them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.